Hello and welcome back to the Space Salvi Institute podcast. I'm Andrew Petiprin, joined as always by Bobby Mixa, and today we are excited to welcome a guest, Michał Łuczewski. And so we're hoping that this conversation will foster more of what the work of the Space Salvi Institute is about, namely hope and also European civilization and the faith in Europe and its relation to the church worldwide. So, Bobby, I'm going to throw it to you to say a word of introduction before we hear from our guest.
Yeah, well, I'm so happy to have Professor Łuczewski on. I've been reading your work and also following you on YouTube. My wife has actually been translating some of the Polish videos for me. But just thank you for coming on. About a couple of years ago, I met Tracy Rowland at a conference, and I was telling her about my interest in John Paul II and also doing a little bit more research on, the Polish Romantic influence on JP2. And she said, "Oh my gosh, you have to read this article that I just got by this young scholar in Poland, Michał Łuczewski." And so she took my email and she sent me this article about king spirits. Juliusz Słowacki and this, I guess, John Paul II at a beatification mass mentioned the king spirits, and I believe handing it over to the king spirits in the Third Republic, or is it Third Republic of Poland?
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, anyways, I was so interested in this because everybody knows this by now that my wife is from Poland, and that I'm just trying to dive into all things Polish, but also some of the things you've just never heard before. And so this article was a great introduction to the Romantic tradition, but also helped me have a deeper appreciation for JP2 and the history of Poland. And so, anyways, I've been a little bit obsessed about eventually meeting Michał Łuczewski, and we had the opportunity actually last month to meet at the Wielka Polska project. Is it the Wielka Polska project?
It's we can say also in English, it's a great project, Poland great project, because
Yeah.
when you say great Poland, it might just get on nerves of our neighbors. So
Yeah.
we say that Poland is a great project rather than project of Great Poland.
Well, it was a great conference, and we had a chance to talk a couple of times. And in light of just a lot of my, kind of observations on Polish culture and where things are today, there was, you had the election a couple of weeks ago. And not getting into the nitty gritty of Poland, but I thought, well, Michał is a sociologist who has also this deep appreciation for Polish history, culture, and also knows philosophy and theology pretty well. So I thought it would be great to just have you on and kind of have a little bit of a take on the landscape of Poland today. So Michał, thanks for coming on. And so anyways, I just thought maybe we kind of just start off a little bit with a lot of people have been reading about the election results in Poland and kind of seeing, well, Poland, where is not only Poland headed, but Europe headed in general. So not many people, I don't want to do a deep dive into Polish politics, but for many people, could you possibly just for people unfamiliar with the political situation in Poland with the different parties, could you possibly just give a basic introduction of the landscape?
Sure. Although when I try to introduce John Paul II, I'm reaching out to analyze, 1,000 years of Polish history. So a brief introduction might not be easy. But to understand, in general Poland, you have to know that Poland was indeed a great country in 18th century and before. So it was Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth that was probably the greatest democracy at that time. And then it was partitioned among, modern, I would say, autocratic states like Russia, Prussia, and Austria. So, democracy was torn apart by three absolutist states. So there's a tension in Poland, the tension that is, I think, felt in all great nations between greatness of the past and then challenges, and even the prospect of disappearance. And I think that in that part of Europe, we feel that the specter of annihilation is hovering over us, and we can feel it in Ukraine, we can feel it in Poland, as you know, Bobby, but also in those other smaller countries like Romania, like Lithuania, Latvia, all those countries that are between Russia and Germany, Hungary among them. And when you look at the Polish politics, it has that mark of the past. So on the one hand, there are, let's say, there's a faction of elites that is Western oriented. So they think that to get moral capital, in my language, political capital, economic capital, you have to orient yourselves to the West. And these are, let's say, liberals, to paint it with a broad brush. So these are liberal elites on the one hand, Western oriented, to the neglect, I would say, of taking into consideration, Polish heritage, Polish legacy. One could call them, nowheres, who sometimes forget that they are from somewhere. And then on the other hand, you have a conservative faction of Polish public sphere that is also seeing Western world as a point of reference, but they want to say Polonize Poland, Polonize Western world rather than Westernize Poland. So that's the difference with regard to liberals. And then they in turn, I think that they come back to the Polish past, to the Polish greatness, and to the great Polish future, sometimes to the neglect of, say, collaboration with others. So the problem is that those two factions of Polish public, they are all the time in conflict, and for the most part, liberal elites have upper hand. But on the other hand, for 8 years, Poland was ruled by the conservatives. But there's that struggle. There's that really intensive polarization between those two parties. And this is something reminiscent of communities that are under pressure. It's called lateral violence. So when there's a community that is colonized, sometimes those people who are colonized do not fight against the oppressors, but they fight against one another. And I think this is the case of Poland, that we do not understand how precarious our position is, how full of anxiety our position is because of our external realities, being between Germany and Russia. And we try to overcome that anxiety by fighting with our neighbors. And I think this is maybe a sad story of Poland. This is the story of polarization and trying to build community, regain solidarity, regain that myth of solidarity from 1980, the myth also of John Paul II of unity, but we cannot do it. And instead of it, we are just plunging into more and more, polarized struggles.
Yeah. Michał, I find your introductory remarks really interesting about Poland, and I'm curious to know where you think things will go now in the wake of the election, where PiS has, I guess, lost its parliamentary majority. And I mean, Poland had really been, it seems, despite the Ukraine war and the tensions about that, really it seemed to be in a strengthening position, growing military and an economy that seemed to be doing pretty well, and maybe influence in the European Union that was was very significant for its size and population and everything. So I wonder, just in the wake of the election results, where do you think, how do you think that will affect kind of the positive trends that some people have been noticing about Poland?
Well, this is just a wonderful question, and you demand that I am a little bit of a prophet. But I'm in Poland, and we are a prophetic nation, so I can do that with pleasure. I think that on the one hand, as you said, Poland was just in extraordinarily shape politically, economically. It was astounding that Poland could survive, Ukraine, the war in Ukraine, that we could just embrace, millions of people coming to us without our economy going to ruins. Yeah, so that was something astounding, and also I said that we are polarized, and that's true. But when the war struck our neighbors, our Ukrainian friends, and also for the most part, also many of them are our personal friends. Robert met one of them, my friend Oleg Kindi from Lviv during that conference he referred to. So it was astounding for us that because we were so polarized, we couldn't expect that at one moment we will reunite. And for me, that was that moment of, that massive help for Ukraine. But on the other hand, I would say that our governing party, Conservative Party, ruled for 8 years, and we didn't have any other party during the after 1989, so after the fall of communism, who would dominate the political sphere as much as the Law and Justice did. So I think that the change was, on the one hand, it was the swing of the pendulum. So we switched from conservative tilt to liberal one, but it was also expecting something new. I think that Poles, mostly from bigger cities, mostly those, say, more progressives, they wanted something else, something new, and the mobilization during the elections was also unprecedented after 1989, and yeah, there are also many other reasons why Law and Justice lost. But when you look at it, you see that's actually the case when the party wins elections for the third time, and that was something unheard of in Poland, but it loses its majority in the parliament. So you have a winning party that is not able to build a coalition, and it also shows you something that about Poland, that it's very hard to build coalitions in Poland, yeah? Especially if you are conservative. This is a challenge.
Michał, kind of on this though, like with the landscape too of the legacy of John Paul II, and like view amongst many people of the church today in Poland, the role that the church plays in Polish society. I remember at the conference a number of Poles mentioning that John Paul II is kind of viewed a little bit as a statue, or even now some amongst the young, amongst the youth, as like a meme. And somewhat kind of like they view him as the one who is kind of distant, but also he happened to like kremówki, which is great Polish dessert. But and so like when I'm teaching at the high school level, and most of the students that I have, half of them are Polish. It's an international school, but most of them have heard of John Paul II, but they do know him as a kind of a hero of Poland.
Yeah.
They don't have much familiarity with him as a man, especially in terms of his thought. But I'll always remember this comment by a Polish nun from Warsaw. She wanted me to come give a little talk on John Paul II's theology of the body. And I thought, well, I mean, his thought must be very well known amongst most Poles. And she said, you'd be surprised, but actually, the richness of his thought, I mean, he's referred to all the time, but the richness, and particularly the theology of the body, isn't as well known as you might think it is. So, could you say a few words on John Paul II's life in Poland?
Strangely enough, also that political struggle in Poland had John Paul II as a central figure. So almost 20 years after his death, we still see that John Paul II is that powerful, towering figure over Polish public sphere. So on the one hand, you have Poland that tries to build, the future of Poland on the legacy of John Paul II. And then there's a tendency to turn him into a monument, into a hero, as you said, into a national hero, a hero who freed Poland, from communism, who liberated continents, who was maybe, the first truly global leader, the beacon of light and hope and freedom for all the nations. And on the other hand, you have people who want to distance themselves from the legacy of John Paul II. So they still want to build Poland on John Paul II, but on the dead body of John Paul II. So on a father who is killed, one could say, referring to René Girard. I know also that Robert, you know that great French-American anthropologist, that they can turn John Paul II into scapegoat, and on that scapegoat, you can build, a new community that will be freed of the father figure, but also freed of the church, freed of the, say, law and justice. Let's say, just referring to peace, that is abbreviation of the Conservative Party, Law and Justice. So we have those two Polands clash over John Paul II. And I think that there's a tendency to treat him among those two Polands as in an instrumental fashion. So we are not really interested in who he was, but who will win, we or them. Yeah, that's the point. And when we can use John Paul II, and I have to also say self-critically, because I don't want to just be to come here as a centrist. I'm a supporter of a let's say conservative intelligentsia milieu in Poland. So I'm not apolitical in any way, but I want to say that also self-critically that there's a tendency on the part of my generation to turn John Paul II into a monument, and then to take a selfie, let's say, with John Paul II. But it's not about John Paul II. It's about me. It's about my self-aggrandizing, showing that I'm better because I happen to know that guy, Karol Wojtyła. And I say that self-critically because during one of my leadership trainings, I saw that I want to be like John Paul II. That he's like he's a persona for me. I told you, Robert, that my journey or conversion journey was a long one. So I started with criticism of John Paul II in the 90s as a teenager, but then I ended up, as a lover, let's say, of John Paul II. Can I say so, lover, or it sounds awkward? Yeah, that's
an admirer, maybe.
Admirer. And I put JP2 on my chest. JP2. So I want to be like JP2. He's my persona. I want to be like him. And a friend of mine told me, that he would support JP2. But when he saw that I'm supporting him, he doesn't want to do it anymore. And sometimes we don't see that we are not good witnesses to values we preach, to people we try to embrace, to to admire. Yeah, so I think there's a subtlety in our admiration. Sometimes admiration goes, also not. It's not about whom we admire, but also who admires. So we admire somebody in order to also boost our own identity. And I think this is the story also of the Polish right and the Polish conservative movement, that we don't really know. We don't really know John Paul II. We know several phrases. We know that he was great, but we don't really know. Strangely enough, theology of the body, I had to really read Western authors to just discover that there's something about theology of the body. Although it was invented in Poland, in the milieu of John Paul II, Karol Wojtyła, Wanda Półtawska, who died, his great friend, who died several days ago when she was about to turn 102. So it was generated here among our peers, let's say, among our prophets, but we didn't listen to our prophets. And sometimes we have to like listen to George Weigel, who said that theology of the body will be that great novelty that was brought to the legacy of the Catholic Church and more to humanity by Karol Wojtyła. And that was also my experience, that I thought when I started my job as the director of programs of John Paul II, I thought that we know everything about John Paul II, so we don't have to come back to him. We can just do some let's say sociological, psychological, but my stuff, not John Paul II stuff. And then I was amazed. Going to our library, that is probably the biggest library in the world, JP2 library in the world. We have like thousands of volumes. I saw that I don't really know him beyond those several phrases, like I don't have to repeat them. We can repeat them, but I don't have to. And then I discovered that there's much more history about this man. I discovered him through poems. I discovered also him through Polish culture. And it was because I invited students, like there was a small circle of students, to read what young Karol Wojtyła read when he was in his 20s, when he was a teenager. And for us, it was just a wonderful journey, because we could look at Western legacy, Judeo-Christian heritage, also Polish culture, through the prism of young Karol Wojtyła. And this is just much more powerful exercise than when you read Karol Wojtyła as a great man you have to admire. Because if you don't admire, it means that you are stupid, yeah? Or if you admire, you want to show that somebody else is stupid. So we just, we went beyond that persona of John Paul II, just to get to know him as a person, yeah, as a human being with flesh and blood.
Michał, I love what you're saying about the figure of John Paul II, and it occurs to me, I heard you give a few minutes talk that was available online, where you were talking about, I think it was at a National Conservatism conference, talking about Reagan and John Paul II as you used the term non-anxious presence, which I thought was really a wonderful way to sum up both of their kind of the way that they led. And it occurred to me as you were talking, thinking about Reagan, and then I want to hear more about that. But thinking about Reagan, I mean, he, a lot of people forget that in 1984, when he was reelected president, he won one of the largest presidential election victories of all time. I think he won 49 out of 50 states. I mean, which is completely unheard of in American politics now. So in as much as Reagan is used by people on the right, like me, as a hero, we do run the risk, as you say, in the same way that Polish people do for JP2, of turning him into this sort of polarizing figure, when in fact, in his day, yes, there were certain polarizing things about him, but he was a wildly popular, indeed unifying figure. And so, I don't know, I just wonder if you have more thoughts about that comparison.
Yeah, that was such a wonderful paraphrase. I'm thinking also about my students. I remember, I don't have to move beyond my university to see how the world changes. So I remember students who were writing their essays for my qualitative data research class, and everybody was writing that John Paul II united Poland, and how was that? So those essays were all about it. And now my students are writing about John Paul II being a meme, as Robert said. And even one of them, with a little bit of my help, he coined the term totemization. I don't know whether it's you understand what it means, but it's like totem. So you turn somebody into a totem, but then the totem is easily turned into a meme. So I really like that phrase, that sometimes we don't see that when we elevate somebody, we elevate ourselves with that somebody, and then people want to tear him down, not because of him, but because of us. Yeah, that's I think one reflection I wanted to share from my students. So that process of elevating a figure and then just destroying the figure. And sometimes these are even the same people who elevated John Paul II, only them just to criticize him, to distance themselves from him, like ex-priests in Poland. They are, I think, in that trajectory. This is a very Girardian trajectory. Yeah? So you elevate somebody to be a king in order to scapegoat them a moment later, and we know it from the Bible. So I think that John Paul II just is undergoing that. And you mentioned Reagan. You could also mention Churchill. You can also mention Lincoln, and you would see that in the Western world, all those great figures who are unifying, who are like father figures, one could say, now they are seen as controversial, as people who are controversial because of their supposed racism, some colonial leanings and so on. And I think that the way to understand also what's going on in Poland with John Paul II is just to compare that wave of smashing the figures of our heroes in the all Western world. It's our Polish version of it. So it's just. In Poland, we don't really understand how you can criticize, Churchill. Although we can kind of understand, because he was also responsible for the Yalta agreements that left Poland. But anyway, we have that sentiment for a Cold War warrior. He started Cold War because he named it. It's hard for us to understand why Lincoln can be criticized, or Jefferson, because for us these are just great men. And I think that for people from the Western world, it's hard to understand why John Paul II is criticized. And I think this is for the same reason, because there's a new community that wants to emerge and wants to just be built, and it is built on the distancing themselves from the past, on the, let's say, scapegoating of the past, on the destruction of old men, of old heroes.
No, Michał, with kind of the delving, like right now, I know in America, in English speaking world, Catholic University of America is I think, funded by the Knights of Columbus, are translating all of John Paul II's. They're publishing all of John Paul II's collected works. Acting Person just came out, or Person and Act, to be a little bit more correct, just came out like 2 years ago. They just published his dissertation on Max. Oh gosh, Shaler, yes,
Max Shaler, yeah.
Shaler. And so it's interesting that, like, kind of within the intellectual circles, there's this kind of revival. Is this going on in Poland, like within the little, you mentioned kind of some of the intellectual circles within Poland? Are they looking to this? Because I remember hearing that a couple of Polish scholars when they saw the American, the volume one of the collected works, they were surprised to see some of these articles in the appendix, because they thought, they didn't even know that he wrote such articles.
Yeah. This is also a paradox, you know, and this is a Polish paradox. We are very, say, intellectual, meaning that we put much emphasis on the value of intellectual work, and Poland is a country of intelligentsia. For us, it is important that, for me, it is important that I'm a professor. And it is important for Karol Wojtyła himself that he was a professor and that he was a man of university. He was not only a man of the church, he was the man of university. And despite that heritage, that intellectual heritage, we do not cherish, I would say, our own heritage. So that I cannot understand that really. Why is that? And for example, we don't have any critical edition of John Paul II's work, and this is what Knights of Columbus are doing now. This is a critical edition. They compare versions of person and act. They try to reconstruct, and they actually reconstructed the final version. And we didn't do it in Poland, so that's a Polish paradox. So maybe that paradox also speaks to what I referred to, that John Paul II was turned into that monument. So we don't have to look which version of person and act is the final version. It suffices that we know that John Paul II is Polish. I'm a little bit exaggerating, but I want to show that Polish paradox that doesn't allow us to cherish maybe our great thinkers in more depth. Although I know that, for example, the status of the Pope or the bishop or a university professor in the US is much lower than in that part of the world. Yeah, so that's all American professors really enjoy coming to Poland because they feel that intellectual air here. So for my part, I would say that that intellectual work is ahead of us. We have to do it. We have to do it in collaborations that are international. I tried for many years to publish a companion, like say, a Cambridge companion to Karol Wojtyła, to show him as a great thinker of the 20th century, great philosopher of the 20th century. So also to show him not as a man of the church, but actually, as an intellectual, as somebody who could also put his philosophy into practice. This is also important. Yeah, this is philosophers, at least in that part of the world, including Marx, they want to put their ideas into practice. So and I couldn't find funding for this, and it was astonishing for me, because that kind of a project should be a no-brainer. That we want to in a way, not only commemorate John Paul II, Karol Wojtyła, but we want also to think about the world with him. And to do it, we need him as an intellectual, not only as a national hero.
Yeah. Michał, much of what you're saying about the intellectual life resonates, I'm sure, certainly with me, but I also know with Bobby, and really that's part of what we're about in this new venture that we're undertaking, the Space Salvi Institute, because we're both Americans, although Bobby lives in Poland now, but we love the intellectual life, and we're men of faith, Catholics, and yet we find certain frustrations with a lack of, you mentioned how when American professors come to Poland, they're sort of treated treated with the kind of dignity maybe they deserve.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't, but maybe they do. But we really think that there's something lacking in kind of the way your average Catholic, average Christian, average even well-educated person in our own country in America kind of goes about in the world. And so Poland is, for me, I believe for Bobby too, an encouragement in certain respects, because, as you say, there is this sort of priority of the intellectual life, with the addition that there are these strong and enduring marks of the faith that aren't just sort of showing up at a building on a weekend like we would maybe experience more or less in the United States, but that it's really embedded more deeply in the culture. Again, you don't need to play the role of prophet, but do you feel hopeful about that continuing in your context in Poland? I mean, I know that there are people who look to Poland and say, well, Poland, they'd say pessimistically, well, Poland will just end up like Ireland it used to be. They'll just sort of go the way of losing their faith. So I don't know, it's kind of an open-ended question to throw back to you, but just sort of I'm interested in your thoughts about the intellectual life and the faith, the marks of the faith in the culture.
Yeah. I know intellectual American life quite well. I studied for 1 year at Columbia in New York. It was a wonderful year for me. Not so wonderful year for my wife. I think that New York is a place for singles rather than families. But I went to a hero of mine, intellectual hero of mine, Charles Tilly, a wonderful professor of sociology. He was a founder of 20th century historical sociology. So I went to that hero of mine, who had like keynote address for European Sociological Association, thousands of sociologists applauding him. And then he said, well, if you are in that class, it's certain that you won't make any career. And I was just, what? I'm at Columbia. I'm just listening to that, god of sociology, and he's telling me that this is the wrong place to make a career. And that just I felt that they, even if you are such at Ivy League school, you somehow as a professor don't feel appreciated by your culture. Even there, maybe this is also the reason why there's so much of radicalism again, in American ivory towers, academic ivory towers. So if you want to understand, the world sociologically, you can think what are the most important coins, what are the most important capitals that are circulating in those fields, in different fields. And in Poland, the coin that gives you, say, prestige and reputation, this is the intellectual coin. This is also cultural coin. And last but not least, although maybe the coin here is not a good metaphor, is also your morality. So this is what makes Poland. Yeah. So this also it explains why Poland is still Christian, because culture, our Christian culture, was a bedrock of our identity. And what's the coin in the East? The coin in the East is violence. When you look at Vladimir Putin, he doesn't have to be cultured man. To rule, he rules with power and with violence. So this is like politics that is war, and we feel it, that it is actually war. And when I'm looking at you guys, so at the Western world, so the coin is really the coin. Yeah. So the capital is really the economic capital, and this is the money makes the world go around. And we cannot have faith in money in Poland because we didn't have economic institutions. We cannot have faith in politics because also our politics collapsed. And as I started with the story of partitions of Poland, so we cannot have the trust in powers and principalities of this world. And in the West, you still can, yeah. So you still can have that faith in money, that you can somehow combat inflation. I was just listening to Mike Johnson. Of course, it is wonderful for me, even as a Catholic, especially as a Catholic, to listen to him as a Speaker of the House. but still, you think that you can, somehow, win against inflation, and in that part of the world, I would say you will never win. Yeah, sooner or later, great empire like the American empire will collapse, and you won't be saved by your politics. You won't be saved by your economy. You will be saved by your culture. Yeah, you will be saved by your culture, and this is why people of culture, people of faith, still can find their safe haven in Poland, safe space even. Yeah, safe space. And with regard to Poland, I would say that Poland will be a second Ireland. I think that after the fall of the conservative government, the liberals will try just to destroy that public culture that is Catholic. So they will really destroy John Paul II as our father, as our saint father. But to some extent, actually, he is destroyed, and the Catholic Church is destroyed already, partly due to sexual abuse scandals. And I just cannot understand why, knowing that they have some similar stories like you had in Boston. For 20 years, in Poland, they were just waiting, like, what's the proper phrase? They were waiting like for 20 years in Poland for the same thing to happen, and they didn't. I mean, the Polish Episcopate didn't do anything about it. So one partial answer why the Catholic Church is being destroyed in Poland are those scandals. But I would say more important thing is that the new landscape that is created by social media. So we are not bringing up our children anymore. I would say this is the internet that is doing it. So and if the internet is educating our children, we cannot expect any stability of whatever institution we are thinking, be it the church, being the press, being whatever. So I think that the revolution of social media is just destroying all institutions. And of course, we have to be in social media as you are, but also we know what is the cost, and you just bring good message to social media. So I'm not really optimistic about Poland, but on the other hand, I'm an editor of probably the only journal in the world that has apocalypse in its name. So we are apocalyptic journal. So I think this is a great time of collaboration. This is a great time when we can build friendships, relations, and then we can just bring up our kids, really, unplug them, fight with them, unplug them, give them, the treasure of faith, give them the treasure of the love for our fatherland. And so this is our time. Yeah, this is our apocalyptic time, and we can enjoy apocalypse in a good company until the Christ comes. Yeah.
Amen. Bobby, anything else from you before we sign off here?
No, I mean, literally kind of like to end on that note, literally with like focus on the end. I mean, it's on a hopeful note. So, I just want to thank you, Professor Michał. It's great and to have you on. And I really just to see the legacy of Poland, and we'd love to have some future collaboration with you and bring Americans to Poland, Americans who are starving maybe for that intellectual milieu to come to Krakow or even Warsaw to fully experience it and feel maybe appreciated as well. So
yeah.
Well, on that note, we thank all of you for listening today, and we give special thanks to you, Professor Michał Łuczewski, for joining us here on the Space Salvi podcast. Those of you listening, if you like what you hear, please do give us a 5-star review, share this with a friend, and follow us on social media. You can find us at spacesalviinstitute.com. Sign up for our emails so that you never miss any new articles, podcasts, or any breaking news. Until next time, God bless.